So, Final Fantasy 7 and 9. They're really good. Now, you all know that 9 is my favorite, but I thought that it would be kind of fun to compare the two because 7 was kind of the base for 9 in a lot of ways, like probably more ways than people might realize, even in terms of storytelling. So I thought it might be really fun to kind of compare the two. So I'm just going to go through a bunch of different things and we'll see where we go. Now, in terms of the theming, Final Fantasy 7 and 9 actually deal with kind of a similar subject matter. And it's not immediately obvious, but both of them deal with life, death, and birth, or rebirth. And they interpret these themes in very different ways, but they talk about them in pretty much equal measure. 9 is a lot more subtle about it. 7 is kind of in your face with, this is what this game is about. This is what the world revolves around. The world literally revolves around the in-game cycle of life and death, which is cool. Whereas 9 is a little bit more subtle about it, and it doesn't really have answers. The biggest difference between 7 and 9 in terms of the theming of life and death is 7 has sort of a definitive answer, a spiritual and physical answer in terms of Mako and the life stream. Whereas 9 leaves a lot open to interpretation, doesn't answer as many questions as it brings up, and it presents a bunch of characters who have their own interpretation and their own philosophy, who all kind of come together and look at the same events with different opinions. Now, if you know anything about me, then you probably know that I would prefer 9's way of tackling it, because I find that more interesting, more thought-provoking, and a little bit more realistic. It's something that you can sink your teeth into a lot more, whereas 7 has a very interesting and very relatable answer to the life, death, and rebirth question. Because it's basically reincarnation. The way that Mako and the life stream works, when you die, your essence, your energy, your soul, as well as your physical aspects, all return to the life stream, which is sort of a core of the world. I don't want to spoil too much for those who don't understand, who don't know everything about this game. So I'm just kind of keeping it mild. But you return to the life stream and you can be reincarnated as some other form of life or some other aspect of the world. You become a tree, you become an animal, your energy gets redistributed into the world, and in that sense, you're never really gone. And in that sense, all life is deeply interconnected with other life. And that is something that is very true, not even from just a spiritual standpoint, but from a very physical standpoint. Like you and I are made of stardust. We're made of the proteins of animals animals and creatures that have existed for thousands and thousands of years, all ingesting each other and surviving in that way. We're powered by the energy of the world itself. Like if we eat a plant, then that plant was powered by the sun, so are we powered by the sun? It's that kind of thing. Like, that's not really spiritual gobbledygook, I guess, not to be disrespectful. That's just kind of how reality is, like we are matter and energy that is taken from other sources of matter and energy, and you can't just spontaneously create more matter or more energy. There's a definitive amount, which is why everything is in a cycle of life, a cycle of death. Like when a plant receives sunlight and feeds on the remains of animals as protein in the soil, then that plant feeds an herbivore. Then that herbivore feeds a carnivore. And that carnivore might feed another carnivore. And then when that carnivore dies, its corpse becomes nutrition in the soil that the plant then consumes and the cycle starts again. And Mako is basically that with a lot of spirituality kind of blended in, which is actually really cool. It has a bit of a Buddhist influence in terms of reincarnation, but it's a little bit more abstract than that. It's kind of its own unique thing, and it's actually pretty thought-provoking, and in a lot of key moments in the story, it's actually very beautiful and touching and very bittersweet. And it makes and it made the story a lot more engaging. This was something that Hironobu Sakaguchi encouraged himself. This is his influence on the project, particularly with Eris. But I might not talk about her because, again, spoilers. I don't want to get into too much stuff. And I know that Eris, stuff that happens with Eris is pretty iconic at this point. But on the off chance, I'm not going to ruin it. Because hey, if you can go in blind to this stuff, then go in blind. I don't know how you manage to do it, but do it. Because it's fun to go in blind. I managed to because I played it when I was a kid. But, Final Fantasy VII, it deals with these themes in a really beautiful way, but a bit of a limited way. And I do like it, but I do prefer 9. And a big reason why I prefer 9 is just the answers aren't really there, and I find that to be a little bit more realistic. Because we can't know for certain what happens when we die, and there are aspects of the world that we just can't understand at the moment. And, we may understand everything one day, but there are just things that, no one's really sure about. Now, for those who don't know, I guess I'll just throw it out there because it's relevant. I'm agnostic, which is basically the lazy answer of, I don't fucking know, and no one does. There's no definitive answer, and, all the answers are either based off faith or theory. I mean, I lean towards theory, obviously, but that moment when you die, no one is really sure exactly what happens because you can't really document that. That's the big question. And in terms of just interpreting your own significance in life in relation to the rest of the world, there's so many different philosophies and ways that you can interpret that. And 9 actually presents a lot of them. It presents characters who kind of go through life in a carefree way, or characters who can't help themselves, so they help other people. Or characters who genuinely fear death and struggle with it for a very long time until they realize that, if they waste all their time fearing death, then they're not really going to live. That's not really life. If you're just constantly possessed by fear. That's Vivi particularly. Even Quina, who's basically a joke character. She's literally, he, it's genderless. They literally call him he throughout the story. But he is this crazy giant frog person who just wants to eat. That's it. But that's presented as an actual philosophy in a very funny way, but also in kind of a sincere way. It's just, there's a lot of little moments, some optional moments of just there's this one scene, it's great. It's not a major spoiler. There's this one character, Freya, and another character, Quina. And they're traveling with Zidane, the main character. And Freya's people are at war, and you're just kind of finding out about this, so it's still a bit of a shock. And they could be, and for all she knows, they could all be getting wiped out right now. So she's very concerned about the fragility of her people and life in general, and she feels very duty-bound to protect people. And when she finds signs of war, she panics and, she kind of breaks down. And then at the same time, Quina says, "Smells like blood, doesn't smell good. You should smell flour instead." And then I think he starts to eat it. And I'm not kidding. Freya actually says, maybe I should be more like Quina. and not care as much. And then Zidane says, I don't think you need to take it that far. And I like little scenes like that are really engaging because it's not really like in your face, like, oh, they're literally debating the complexities of life. But they are. And it's just, it flows very naturally, and it's funny. At the same time, it's very thought-provoking. You know? Like, because even Queena, like, God help me, Queena kind of has a point. You know? Like, how stressed can you really be? Like how much is stress really going to help you? Obviously, like, you know, you want to take responsibility. You don't want to be as extreme as her, or maybe you do. You know, that's up to you. And I like that because it allows for more interpretations of the story, and that's kind of the big reason why I replay 9 so often, whereas you know, I like never really play Final Fantasy VII all the way through that often. Like I normally kind of fall off because the story is, to me, a little bit less engaging because it doesn't have that heavy, interesting character element. Just all these conflicting ideas coming together, sometimes clashing, sometimes violently. You know, it talks about ethics, it talks about life and death, philosophy, perspective, the responsibility that every person has, or the responsibility that no one has. You know, like, should you live selflessly or selfishly, like all these other little things. And it handles it naturally. There's no, like, big philosophical lectures, really, at any point. It just kind of shows all these different perspectives. Both villains and protagonists have very different perspectives on life and death. And in 7, that really doesn't come up very much, and you don't really learn that much about individual characters after a certain point, because at the beginning, you know, at the beginning of the game, in Midgar, the characters are all pretty well fleshed out. They have a lot of dialogue, a lot of personality, a lot of funny stuff, a lot of fun stuff, a lot of emotional stuff. And then it just kind of really, really, really focuses on Cloud. And Cloud is a good character. I like Cloud. I found myself really caring about him. But I found it hard to care about the other characters as much. Whereas with 9, you know, like, you're constantly changing perspective. You spend some time playing as almost every single character in the game. I think that the only exception is Amarant, who's like the monk character. And, you know, he's the only one. Like, you play as literally everyone else to some extent. Even if it's just in a mini game, even if it's just really temporary, you play as them. And that kind of influences that, you know, level of perspective that you have. And I think that kind of comes through in Mother 3. If you haven't watched my video on Mother 3, then it's somewhere. It might be in the description. And, you know, like, that game changes perspectives a lot, and it lets you kind of connect with the characters more and see characters from different perspectives. And that's a pretty fun way of handling it, you know? And it literally lets you get in the mindset. It lets you literally walk a mile in the shoes of all these different characters. Whereas 7, it's Cloud's story, and Cloud is a good character. I really feel the need to reiterate that. Cloud's a good character. I like him. I like the original version of him a lot more than the reinterpretation of him in Advent Children and a bunch of other stuff where he was, you know, like, very emotionally subdued, in my opinion. He was much more of a fun and engaging character throughout the journey of Final Fantasy VII itself. But, you know, like, Barrett doesn't really talk much when you leave Midgar. Neither does Tifa. Eris kind of does. And granted, that's largely because, okay, you can take along whatever party members you want, and that's cool. And that kind of does help with the gameplay front because it allows you to have more variety. But the thing is, it does just have that sort of side effect of, like, the characters are a little bit less fleshed out, because they're talking less. They're having less conversation because they're not guaranteed to be in your party as often. And for the record, there's a lot of benefits to doing that, like I said, because it allows for the player to kind of customize their experience even more. And Final Fantasy VII is a very customizable game by Final Fantasy standards, and that's good. That has its advantages, but it has its disadvantages, I guess is all I'm trying to say. Now, moving on from that, one last thing that I do want to talk about. Final Fantasy 7 and 9, they have different pacing, to say the least. Whereas 7 has like very long stretches of pure open-ended gameplay. Where like you have this big world that you can explore, go do optional stuff, go capture chocobos, go fight optional stuff, go to a village super early, go to the Golden Saucer, all this stuff, and that's really cool, and I like that. But it also has kind of long stretches where the story isn't really getting developed, and it is an interesting story. So for some people who were really engaged in the story, like that might kind of lose their attention a little bit, and that happened to me when I was younger. Now I kind of appreciate, the fact that the kind of balance that 7 has, where you can go long stretches of just focusing on optional content and then really focus on the story. But there are definitely those kind of lulls in the story where it gets a little bit less interesting. Whereas 9, there's always something happening. That game has like a breakneck pace. It never slows down unless it's just taking the time to breathe and let the characters be characters and, just kind of chill out, talk, just go through their emotional trauma, because, God, there's a lot of emotional trauma in 9. A wide variety of them, too. A wide variety of tragedies in Final Fantasy 9. But you have all these characters that are really engaging, and they're constantly doing something interesting. Whereas with 7, it's kind of like, very often you just have to kind of make your own fun. And it gives you the tools to do that. But the thing is, 9 does too, just to a slightly lesser extent. So 9 kind of has its cake and can eat it too. Like, you have a bunch of side quests and optional areas and secrets to find and secret bosses, chocobo minigames, and all this other stuff. Not to the extent of 7, obviously. 7 is like the king of Final Fantasy minigames and side quests. But it has both. It has a really engaging, active story that's constantly moving forward, but you always have the option to kind of stretch your legs and go explore around and stuff. And I personally do prefer that a little bit more, because for the people who... I think that's kind of a win-win scenario, because the people who want to do side stuff have side stuff, but the people who want to keep consistently engaged with the story are consistently engaged. So I think that 7 loses a little bit in that department. But the sheer amount of side content, 7 just kicks everybody else's ass. So it's ridiculous how much side content there is. And it's not filler. That's what I love about it. It's not like needless fetch quests. It's like full-blown minigames, actual challenging optional boss fights. The arena's really cool because you can kind of do these self-imposed nerfs on yourself. Hey, don't use magic or do it in this many turns or whatever. That stuff is really cool. I really, really like that. And I want to see more stuff like that. 9, any other Final Fantasy game just doesn't have shit on 7 when it comes to that department. So it definitely does have that. Because I would say that 7, in a lot of ways, has a bit of a gameplay advantage over a lot of other installments in the series. And that leads me to abilities. Holy shit, abilities. The abilities are so good in both of these games. It's like picking a favorite child, trying to pick between the two. It's all up to personal preference. I think that most people might prefer 7. I'm just kind of throwing out a guess, but it seems like most people just really, really, really love the Materia system, and they should, because holy shit, it's good. You can do so much creative stuff with it. Whereas with 9, you technically have more tools to play around with, but not only does it take a while to get going, it's less customizable. So what I mean by that is, in 9, you have set characters with set abilities that they can learn. Passive abilities are a huge deal in 9. Like, every character has almost 30 auto abilities at least. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of passives that you can set up, including immunities, automatically casting spells in certain situations, auto potion counterattacks, different varieties of counterattacks, counter magic, um, just all this crazy stuff. Whereas with 7, it's kind of up to you to make your own abilities, and I like that. Not a lot of games let you do that, and I wish that more would, because with 7, you start out with your very basic magic stuff. You have like thunder and ice and fire, but then you get all materia, sorry. And if you have like all these different slots, and there's support connectors. Shit, I don't know what the term is anymore. But there's these little connectors that might exist like in between slots. And if 2 slots are connected, then one materia can affect the other materia in like 10,000 different ways, depending on what the materias are. So you got all materia, and all materia will let you cast a spell that affects the entire enemy party, as opposed to just targeting one. And there's like a limited amount of times you can use it. And as you level up your all material, I'm just gonna accept it when I say material by accident now. I have no idea what the fuck is wrong with me today, but it allows you to cast like multiple times on all opponents, and that's really powerful and really cool. And if you associate like elemental attack with those magic spells, then boom, all of a sudden you're dealing fire damage in addition to having fire magic on access. So like when you deal physical attack, you'll deal fire damage. When you have there's like special ones that will allow you to use a physical attack on all opponents at once, or like just do more damage. So you can like literally have like these 3 sets of materia all connected to each other that do a bunch of different custom effects that you came up with yourself. And like there's a limit of how many different abilities you can have, but you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with that, and that's really cool. I also really like how the materia, if you're using like magic materia, for instance, it will raise your magic stats but lower your physical stats. So it's a trade-off. And there's some materia that will, like almost every materia raises something and then lowers something else, which is really cool. Like the cover materia will make you better in terms of defense. Cover is literally just like an auto ability that will let you, tank damage for allies every now and then, which is really handy for the more tanky characters. But then you gotta start to think about your combinations a little bit. Because, if you give Barrett cover materia, that really suits that character, because, like he's tanky, he has really high HP and defense, vitality. And so you don't want to give him too much magic, because magic materia actually lowers your max HP. So I love that stuff. Like everything is a trade-off, and you got to balance it out and think ahead and really think like what kind of stuff do I really want this character to be able to do? Like you can create a legitimately really useful, versatile character who can't even use magic, and that's really cool. There's some materia that just grants its own little unique ability, like the steel materia, enemy skill materia, which enemy skill stuff. I don't know why I've always loved that stuff. Just the fun of hunting new powers has always been really appealing to me, and yeah, like that. All that stuff is really great. And then on the other side, you have 9, which is also really good, but very different and a little bit more limited. But at the same time, in some ways, it's actually more flexible. And what I mean by that is it's less customizable, but you have more options overall, which might seem like an oxymoron, but it's not. Because in Final Fantasy IX, all the characters have their set roles. They can equip certain things. The armor is largely interchangeable. Like everyone has their own kind of little armor class and armor subclass, and there's like certain things that everyone can equip. Like the magic users can use robes. The like, kind of light armor warriors can use certain special chest pieces, Zidane and Amaran. There's heavy armor for the knights, Steiner and Freya. And, like that stuff, like that's fairly versatile, but where it really comes into play, all of this flexibility is from the abilities, because characters learn a lot of abilities in this game. And there's a lot of little special rules, which I actually really like. So, you have characters who have, like, all characters have auto abilities, which are equipable passives. And, like, you can only equip so many, and they all have different costs. So you can't just equip everything you want. And then you have action abilities, which are the typical, like, use your special sword attack, use your special spell, stuff like that. But a lot of them are contextual, and a lot of them have special effects and interact with each other in interesting ways. So every character has this set group of abilities. Vivi is a black mage. You're not going to make him do anything else. You're not going to teach him sword arts. You're not going to buff his physical attack to a ridiculous extent. But you can kind of make him do a lot of different things with auto abilities. You can enhance his magic. You can make him cast Reflect on himself at the start of every fight, which makes him effectively immune to magic effects, most of them, not all of them. And then he can like get an auto ability that will like strengthen his black magic if he reflects a spell. So what you can do is you can have everyone in your cast have Reflect cast on them, auto reflect, and then you can have Vivi have an auto ability that boosts his magic when he casts Reflect. So then you can cast all Blizzaga on your entire team, and then it will bounce back and deal like max damage 9999 to like a boss enemy, and it will utterly break his face. And like that kind of stuff, like that stuff that I just came up with on my own through experimentation. So there is still stuff like that, but it's a little bit less, I guess, flexible, because in 7 it feels like you're legitimately creating your own characters, whereas 9, like what I just described about Vivi's the only character who can do that, whereas if there was an equivalent in Final Fantasy VII, anyone could do that. And you could do all kinds of weird combinations in that sense. And both systems kind of have their advantage and disadvantage, because 9, it's like all the characters feel unique and special. They have their own little role. Some of them, they're not all perfectly balanced, but most of them are, actually. Like Queena's like super situational, but most of the other characters like have their uses. And I mean, Queen is just kind of luck-based is the problem with that character. And there's like a lot of little special rules that you have to watch out for, but his abilities are flexible. So, I don't know, and like just the fact that, like Steiner and Vivi can combine their powers into sword magic. Steiner can use sword magic, where Vivi, casts a spell on his blade, and then Steiner attacks it, and it does crazy-ass damage. It only uses Steiner's MP. And, like, little things like that, like that's a really nice touch. That kind of lovely little duet of death that they can cast together. And it says a lot about, like, the connection between those characters, and it just gives that little edge of teamwork. Like, that stuff is fun. And that's something that's unique to them. So, like, there's a lot of little, tricks and turns that you can do. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. I don't know which one I prefer. I gotta be honest with you. I like them both a lot. So, yeah, like right now, I'm kind of I'm in the middle of replaying through 9. So I want to do a big-ass analysis of it. And after that, I'm going to play through 7. And I might live stream some of this. And I think that I might do like more heavily edited version of this video. But I think that it's more likely that I'll just do big analyses of both of these for the main channel. And I think that would be really fun. And yeah, like obviously I have a lot to say about them. I didn't even get into the visuals and the presentation and stuff like that. There's a bunch of little elements that I didn't talk about, like like the level curve, the difficulty, things like that. But I think that this was a good start. It kind of gets my concepts out there. So I'm just gonna put this up as a fun little conversation, I guess. And yeah, let me know what you think. If you like this kind of video, let me know. This was kind of a new weird format where I just kind of sit down and I just ramble about a topic that was interesting to me. So if you guys want to see more of this, please let me know. Love y'all. Have a fabulous day. I'm going to get back to recording the thousands of games that I need to record.